thank you for being here. Appreciate everybody that can make it out here, everybody that's online as well. We have a really interesting and really good program tonight. I do want to start with a few announcements. First of all, we've gone through the voting process for the officers for our chapter for 2022. And the officers will be myself, Roberto Gaitan as president again. Robin Gelston will be our first vice president. Where's Robin? Robin back there. Barbara Pete Rapier will be our second vice president. Betsy Hosick will be our treasurer. She wasn't able to make it out tonight. And Carolyn Cardilli will remain as our secretary. So we have our officers set for next year. And that's always a great thing to start the new year, knowing that we have all those positions filled. I will be posting that out there along with the rest of our leadership team, the people that hold the different director positions for all the different groups that we have. By the way, we will be having sort of our first leadership meeting in January. And one of the things that we will tackle is the budget for next year. So if you have a pet project that you're thinking about, something that would be great for us to make an investment on, let us know. Any one of the officers, one of the directors, so that we can plan accordingly. The new class registration is underway. The new class begins in the middle of January. If you go to our website, rgvctmn.org, you'll find more information about that. Share that with your colleagues, share that with your friends, anybody that you think that might be interested. I think we have, Barbara, registration for new classes ends January 5th, will be the last day for that. We attended the Winter Fest that Harlingen, the public library, held here yesterday or last night. And there must have been hundreds of kids, so many families that came out here, which was great. One of the things that I realized we did not have is something that we can give those families, something that we can give to these kids. We were fortunate that we had requested Sea Grant give us information about the sea turtles that come to the Texas coast. So we had a booklet that they had prepared with a coloring book. We had the posters that they created, and the kids loved it. You know, ask anybody if they love a sea turtle, and they're like, yeah, absolutely, we love it. Except that one kid. We had one kid who's like, no, I don't. I'm like, oh, okay. The mom said, hey, her brother does, so we'll take a poster anyway. But this event did make me think that we need some more outreach material. And if it isn't something that we create, if you volunteer at one of our partner sites, whether it's at Estaca de la Palma, Sea Turtle Inc., and they have material that we can share, then let's offer the opportunity for us to say, every time we're at an outreach, we should have some of their material so people know about these different places. And again, if we target the kids drag their parents. If kids care about things like what we're trying to do with the pelican issue, if we can have our kids be concerned and interested, then they drag their parents along, sometimes screaming and kicking, but hey, bring your parents along. But they'll start to pay attention. And so whether it's us creating our own posters, our own pamphlets, our own booklets, let's think about doing that. And let me know if there is something like that you would like to do. One thing that we've talked about before with the group that volunteers out at Ramsey is if we could create a t-shirt with all the different plants, the maps, the birds that go to Ramsey, then that's a great thing. Imagine if we had that information out for the families last night. Because when we would talk to them about Ramsey being one of our places, most of them are like, where is that? What's there? And so we need to be ready for the next outreach event. Speaking of which, the next outreach event is at WAWI at SPI. So we will have a table. Now the question is, what will we have there to share with the community? WAWI is in February 8th through the 12th. February 8th through the 12th. And so we'll have a table there the whole time. What we can share, things like the pelican, that's a perfect fit. And speaking of which, I don't know if Diana's on the line, but Kate, since you're here, they're actually interested in having us do a presentation on the issue about the pelican crossing. Whether it's a presentation to the group or definitely at least to have a table just for that cause. And so we need to plan for that. I think that'll be great. So Kate's question is whether we had the Barney coloring book. Yes, we did. And so I think the title is Barney and Ted. TED stands for the Turtle Excluder Device. And so that was a great idea. They presented it as a little book. coloring book for the kids to read and follow along and color along, and yet at the same time they're letting them know about the plight of the turtle and this device that helps them. Yeah, correct. So Kate is saying that if that could be the next step, what could we create? I mean, these kids come to the library, they had their parents carrying all these free books that they were giving away, and these are kids that are really interested, that want to read, that want to do these kinds of activities, and we need to be able to tap into them. But imagine that coloring book about the plight of the pelican, and do it in such a way that they begin to care and understand, and hey, tell their parents, slow down. This is one of the highways that we're worried about. Little things like that. If we can plant the seed, I think that'd be great. Um, this year, I was going to say this year, 2022 is the 20th anniversary for our chapter, which is fantastic. So we have folks like Frank Wiseman that to thank for things like for having established us for that length of time. So we're kicking off 2022 with a special get together at Estero Grande State Park on January 11th. We won't have a virtual meeting at that time, but I had emailed the listserv with information about that, how to register. You go through Evite to register and buy a ticket. It's free, cost is $0. And there really is no paper ticket for you to show, but this allows us to be able to track how many people we can plan for. We have that great upper deck out there at Estero that can fit about 50 people. If we need more, then we can move out to one of their areas in the back, which would be fantastic if we had so many people there that we had to move. Well, we're hoping to plan the refreshments and so forth, and so we need to know how many people we can have. But let's kick off the year celebrating our 20th anniversary with a get-together, which seems like forever since we've been able to do. Okay, with that, we'll have Joni presenting our milestones.
Hello, hello. Can you all hear me? Okay, first and foremost, what I'd like to do is recognize Sandra Mink. Now, I believe this woman has been volunteering quite a bit, but she finally input enough hours of her volunteer time to get certified as a Texas Master Naturalist. So Sandra, congratulations. Yay! He wants to take the picture. Great, good job. Okay. Then we do have people who are earning milestones, but I don't think any of those people are here. But if some of you, it's been very difficult to get milestones to people because of COVID and all of that other stuff. But if you happen to know any of these people and can take their milestone pins to them, I would really appreciate it. So Peggy Walker, I think lives out at I think she lives in Port Isabel. So if anybody is from there, if you could take Peggy her pin, I'd appreciate it. Melanie Demas has earned her 100-hour pin. I'm not sure where Melanie lives, but if you know her, if you could take her pin, I'd appreciate it. And then Evelyn Alpert. Evelyn, I believe, is out at the island as well. So if anybody knows her, if you can take her pin, I'd appreciate that. So, and then we have one other person, Alex Gomez. I think Alex is from Brownsville, but I can get her pin to her because I'm from Brownsville. And those are the people who have earned milestones last month and part of this month. So, but again, congratulations, Sandra.
Thank you, Joni. We will move on to a few announcements from Norma. Thank you, Patrick.
There. Where you want me to stand? Here? Okay. This circle is our Harlingen Christmas bird count circle. If you are within this circle, and it may be difficult for you to tell, but you can see it starts Stewart Place, Palm Valley, Combs, Rio Hondo, almost all of Rio Hondo, all of San Benito, and below to Rangerville. You can count birds in your backyard if you do not want to travel on a team. We do have some openings on some teams if you would rather do an area. So area 6 has 4 sub areas, A, B, C, and D. We divided those up about 10 years ago because it was very difficult to get a good bird count with somebody just doing one huge area. So they're divided up now, and we have great counts because we fill those areas with people. The place that we have fallen down is in that 7 in the center, but we have people that are going to count. But backyard counting, there's a lot of country out there, but there's also a lot of urban area. And as Susan said, well, the cats are scaring all my birds away. Do you have a hummingbird feeder? Yes. Do you have buff bellies that come? Yes. We need you to count your buff-bellied hummingbirds, any ruby throats that you get on January the 1st is our day. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Yes. If you're going to count, yeah, you just need to count in your yard because somebody has been assigned. I didn't put I have a big map of the 7 with, it's divided into A, B, C, D, and E. And actually, Bill Clark, if you know who he is, takes 2 of those areas because he knows where hawks hang around in the city of Harlingen. And he likes to do this lake across the street. So that's his areas. But the other areas have been taken by other individuals except for D, which includes the thicket. I haven't heard from that guy. So if you're really good with birds and you like to walk, you can take that area. Yeah. And Isidro took it last year. He has not answered or replied to my emails. So if he should happen to pop up, you could go along with him and learn. But also it includes some good parks in that area, besides the thicket, some city parks. And so anyway, if you're interested in having a backyard bird count, I have some forms, some tips, information for you. I believe that ACUS is decided that they're going to help have a countdown dinner. I wasn't planning on trying to have one myself. We didn't have one last year because of COVID, but they've selected Stefano's, which has that huge outdoor area and good food. So we might have a countdown dinner that night. It's Saturday, January the 1st. And if you want to sign up, give me your email address and we can see where you are on the map. Make sure that you're in the circle. And do you have any questions? Like, do you know what the Christmas bird count is? Everybody knows what it is. All right, that's great. So I don't need to explain that in detail, which would be a whole program, right? So the forms that are here are the actual count of the birds, which I have just 2 pages for the backyards. A rare bird, in case that fork-tailed flycatcher that's over at San Benito flies over into your yard, you will have to fill out this form. So that the other ones really that you need to worry about are the ruby throat hummingbirds, the female, because you can't really tell on flight or at a feeder if it's a ruby throat or a black chinned. You can't tell really if you have a rufous hummingbird or Allen's female. So those you just put down as a rufous Allen's mark. And then if you see the males, you have those counted. And really, hummingbirds are important to count because we last year, well, not last year, a couple of years ago, we actually had Victoria County had more buff-bellied hummingbirds than Cameron County, Harlingen. So but Mark was not very happy about that. So we need to start counting those buff-bellied hummingbirds in the backyard. Although in our defense, I do have to tell you that if you do not know it, for some crazy reason, the buff-bellied hummingbirds move up the coast into that direction, almost into Louisiana. That's their migration in the winter. Don't know why, but that's what happens. So any questions? No? Okay. Well, before you leave, come and. Oh, you have to.
There will be an article in the Winter Chachalaca that Norma, I believe you wrote about the Christmas bird count. Expect that in your mailbox, hopefully before the end of tonight. I'll send that out. We will be moving on to tonight's guest speaker, and Barbara will be introducing Autumn.
Oh, there I am. It's my privilege to first introduce, I'll introduce Autumn in a second, but Autumn's professor advisor is here, Dr. Ashley Tanner from Texas A&M Kingsville, and you work for the Kleberg Institute, correct? And we're really excited that you've come to watch her do this presentation. It's my pleasure. I ran into Autumn. Actually, I saw a poster that she posted at Ramsey Park, and it said that she, wanted people to send her texts if they saw Texas tortoises. And I volunteer there weekly since 2015, and Sandra and quite a few people, Susan, and so I thought this is a great project for our chapter members to support. So I took a picture of her poster and I took it home, and Robert said, "Is this current?" And I said, "I don't know." So I texted her, and that started our friendship. I think we're friends now that we've gotten to know each other so well. And but I didn't know what she looked like, but I did see. I saw this female walking around in snake boots and holding this TV antenna. To me, that's what it looked like. And so I just walked up to her, which, if you know me, that I like to ask people what they're doing. And so I walked up to her and I said, "Are you the turtle lady?" And so, that formed our basis for our friendship and relationship. And then I got the idea, oh, this would be a great presentation. It's so local. All of us know where Ramsey Park is, and care about the Texas tortoises. And so when I asked, and her professor said she could do this, I was very excited. And we're really pleased to have you here tonight and to share what you found out about the Texas tortoises.
Hello, good evening. My name's Autumn Coronado, and this is I'm standing on the wrong side. My Urban Ecology Texas Tortoise Project under the supervision of Dr. Ashley Tanner, Dr. Evan Tanner, and Dr. Sandra Rideout. I just recently graduated from Texas A&M University Kingsville with a Bachelor's of Science in Range and Wildlife Management and a minor in Biology. I plan to apply for federal agencies such as USDA, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Services, U.S. Customs and Border Protection, NRCS, and Texas Game Warden. In the meantime, I'm applying for wildlife technician jobs to gain more experience. I have a strong interest in conservation work, which is why I took this project with Dr. Tanner. I have worked at the aviary under Dr. Tortoise. I've worked at an on-campus dorm job, and I've also worked for the Harlingen Engineering Department while I was in college. My hobbies include hiking, bird watching, visiting Texas national parks, watching new shows on Netflix, and learning Spanish because it's very much needed. I visited Costa Rica this past summer with Tamuk, and there I learned about agriculture practices and what grad school could be like. And that's me with one of the tortoises. Oh, one back. So an introduction to the project. Why did we choose to study the Texas tortoise? So over the past few decades, Harlingen has grown in population and urbanization has a massive effect on wildlife. So the Texas tortoise is a threatened species and it is a case selected species. So that means it has less offspring and it has long lifespan. So that was why we chose to study it, because it was important towards their conservation. What is urban ecology? Urban ecology studies ecosystems, including humans living in cities and urbanizing landscapes. It aims to understand how wildlife and natural systems interact with human development and populations. And it's become increasingly important as human populations continue to grow exponentially. So objectives. The main objective of the study was to study the Texas tortoise's habitat selection pattern in an urbanized park. And right there is a picture of one of the tortoises moving from one location to another. So the study site that we chose was Grande Nature Park because it is, I am from here, from Harlingen, so it is very close, and I'm interested in seeing like how people react to projects with like in my hometown. So the size of the park is 55 acres. It is part of the Tamaulipan thorn scrub, which includes species such as mesquite, Brazil, Texas ebony, huisach, rotama, and grangenio. And what does this mean for the Texas tortoise? South Texas is a suitable habitat for this species as they are found in scrub forests and subtropical areas. And here I attached a picture of the map in case no one has been there yet, if anyone here hasn't been. So Grande Nature Park was once part of the Harlingen landfill, and this was something that we found really interesting because it's just crazy how they can take something that was once like where trash was and you're turning it into a nature preserve. So it is an excellent study site choice because of the fact that it is being restored. So this change from a landfill to a nature preserve shows that the Texas tortoise would have had to have colonized from another area, and so it migrated from those surrounding areas. Along the Royal Colorado, there are other parks nearby, including Harlingen Thicket and McKelvey Park. And the Royal Colorado is 90 miles long and stretches from the lower Rio Grande Valley to the lower Laguna Madre. So there's numerous possibilities where these tortoises could have migrated from. And then here I attached a picture of the Royal Colorado and how it stretches from the lower Rio Grande Valley to Laguna Madre. And then on the right is a picture of Hugh Ramsey and the Royal Colorado going through it and the other parks that are surrounding it, such as McKelvey Park. So for methods for this project, we first had to set aside a day where we did field work, basically just locating tortoises that were in the park. And this was where we did our capture methods. We would go through the park, and whenever we found a tortoise, we would make sure to first log its location on the data sheet. And whenever we would start doing the marking techniques, we would always hold on to the tortoise or put it in between our legs, like I have the tortoise here. And for our marking techniques, it is a non-invasive technique. We would glue this transmitter on the third scoot of the shell, which is the furthest one in the back. And we would glue the transmitter with epoxy glue, which is non-invasive. And we would glue it to the third scoot on the back of the shell because we were trying not to interfere with mounting during reproduction, or we were trying not to interfere with its movement throughout the park. So we would always face the transmitter downwards. And then we also used a 4-letter code with water-based acrylic paint. And that 4-letter code, you'll probably see it on the next one. That 4-letter code with the water-based acrylic paint was just in case the transmitter was to fall off, because it is humid in South Texas and they are going through a lot of vegetation. I could find the tortoise again, and I could look back on the data sheet and see, oh, this is that 4-letter code tortoise. And then after we would mark them, we would always put pressure for around like a minute to 2 minutes just to make sure the transmitter stayed because of the humidity. And we would always make sure that it just dried before we released it. So after that, I would go back and I would do tracking, which was done with radio telemetry, which kind of works like radio signals, picking up locations. And I would do that around 1 to 2 times a week, maybe 3, depending on my class schedule. And I would try to go once or twice a day. And right there is the receiver with the cord and the antenna, and that's a tortoise right there. I don't know if anyone can see it, but it's like right there. So demographics. At the end of my study time, my study period, I ended up capturing and marking 5 Texas tortoises. The male to female ratio was 2 to 3, and right there's a picture of a male and a female. And so how do we sex the tortoises? One common way is to look at the plastron or the bottom of the shell. On a female, it will be flat, kind of like table-like, whereas on a male, it'll be concave like a bowl. And that's because they use that during mounting for reproduction. And then at the end of the study period, which was from June to December, I collected a total of 40 locations. And right there is a picture, I'm not doing the right one, of a juvenile tortoise, which I located recently. So that is a good indication of tortoise reproduction within the park. So we did do GIS for this project, and our 3 variables that we used were distance to trails, distance to restoration areas, and vegetation height. For distance to trails and distance to restoration areas, we used raster data, and then for vegetation height, we used LiDAR data. So what is raster data? Raster data is spatial data model that defines space as an array of equally sized cells arranged in rows and columns. Or an easier way to describe that is that it splits the landscape into pixels to show vegetation. So like this picture here shows. So what is LiDAR data? LiDAR stands for light detection and ranging. It's remote sensing that uses light in the form of a pulse laser to measure ranges to the earth. And how do we use that for vegetation height in this study? It's basically when the laser pulse hits the ground and bounces up, that gives us our vegetation height. And it doesn't only give us vegetation height, it also gives us density, so the amount of vegetation in that area. So here is a picture of LiDAR data from Hugh Ramsey. And the hotter colors are higher in height, and the cooler colors are lower in height. So as you can see in Hugh Ramsey, there is a lot of shorter vegetation because of all the cooler colors. And on the other side of the arroyo, I'm guessing those are like properties, there are hotter colors, so higher vegetation. So when I was doing my GIS work, I first had to get the boundary of Hugh Ramsey. And I got the back image from the Web Soil Survey website. And I basically just used the Hugh Ramsey map that I showed you guys earlier to map out around the park. And then I mapped out the trails. So in red is Ebony Loop, and then blue is Indigo Trail, white is Retama Trail, and then pink is Greb Pond Trail, and green is Lower Indigo Trail, and yellow is Arroyo Trail. That just gives you a good idea of where I mapped out the trails. And then I also did the same with the restoration areas because, as you'll see later, they are very important to the results. And then I went ahead and merged the trails together. And I did the same thing with the restoration areas. And then after that, I went ahead and applied the LiDAR clip that I talked about earlier, which shows our vegetation height and density. And I did my distance to trails, which is one of the 3 variables. And I also did it with distance to restoration areas. And then lastly, which was a really exciting part, was we finally got to plot down the locations that I had collected using the radio telemetry. So here you can see a lot of them stuck to around the Ebony Loop, and some were back here too, but most of them were found here, which is where a lot of the restoration areas are. So I did do vegetation selection. While I was out in the field, I had a vegetation column on my data sheet, and I didn't just collect the species. I also collected if they were native or non-native. So the natives that were included were mistflower, hog's plum, and Texas Indian mallow. And then the only non-native one I recorded was guinea grass, everyone's favorite, right? Yeah, but so for vegetation selection, I did a little graph, bar graph showing that I just basically added all the natives together that I had recorded, and then I added the guinea grass, which was the only one with 6, but that there shows that they were selecting native vegetation over non-native. And then on the right, I did the most commonly used species between the native and non-native, and it showed that they were selecting Texas lantana the most, and they were selecting guinea grass for non-natives. Okay, so for our results, I need my paper for this. My professors went ahead and ran the Maxent model, and to explain this, this right here is just a map, an overview of the restoration areas, and then right here is a graph showing on the y-axis is the logistic output, and so basically it goes from 0 to 1, meaning pixels predicted 100% suitable habitat likelihood. That's what this is showing. So the easiest way to explain this is the further away from the restoration parks, the less suitable habitat there would be for a Texas tortoise, and the closer to the restoration area, the more suitable habitat there is for a Texas tortoise. So for this discussion, I just wanted to talk about how we had gotten a lot of rain in the beginning of my study. It was probably like it was a lot of rain for being out there in the park. And so here it just shows how much rain we got and how like it was a lot of rain. And basically this had an effect on the vegetation because it did make the vegetation very dense, very tall in height. And here is a picture of one of the restoration areas where I found my Texas tortoise. And then here is another area that has a lot of guinea grass and probably other grasses in there too. So that just shows that they were probably selecting the restoration areas because they were easier to get through and well maintained, whereas other areas that had grown out of control probably weren't suitable for them. And then for discussion continued, they did the same thing for distance to trails. So it was the same thing as restoration areas. The further away you go from a trail, the less suitable habitat it is, and the closer you get to a trail, the more suitable habitat. And that was based off of the data I had collected. And then here is the restoration. I cannot work this thing. Here's the restoration area clip that I had shown earlier, and that's just plotted with the locations that I had collected. So you can see that in these purple areas, that's where I found a lot of the tortoises, and those are all the restoration areas. And I attached the LiDAR picture again, just to, I guess, clarify that the LiDAR data was important because vegetation height and density is important. But when it came to the study, it wasn't what they selected. They ended up selecting the restoration areas. And this was I really enjoyed this part of the project because it got me out and it socialized me a little bit since we had just been in the pandemic. So this part was really cool because I had set up a Google Voice account where people could reach out to me and say, hey, I found a tortoise on this trail or this location. And I'd be like, great, I'm gonna go over there right now and go check. So I thought that was really nice, and I felt like it educated people too about the Texas tortoise because once they saw these flyers, they would reach out to me, hey, what did you study? Like, can you tell me more about it? What are you studying at school? So I felt like these two flyers right here were really helpful. And this one right here, I just basically did because I had people coming up to me asking about the painting on the back of the shell because it is used in a very bad way. Like people just do it to color their shells. So I just put that out there just to make sure everyone knew. And that kind of helped them too, that they wouldn't ask about the paint anymore. They would ask more about the project. So I felt like that was very helpful. And that's the end of my presentation. I want to say thank you to Barbara and the Texas Master Naturalists for keeping up with the park. As you could see from the results, the restoration areas were what they were selecting. So it's going good for that. And I wanted to thank Dr. Tanner, Dr. Evan Tanner, and Dr. Rideout for guiding me through this project. And we still have more to go because we're doing for the Texas Wildlife annual meeting. So yeah, I just wanted to thank you guys. Any questions? Yes. They were eating prickly pear a lot, but they were just the cactus were dying. So, and that was odd because I wouldn't find them near cactus, and I'm guessing because they had all collapsed, so they weren't really finding like the fruit on it. That's, I wouldn't know the answer to that, but it did flood a little bit in New Ramsey, but not too much. I wouldn't say because it was higher in elevation a little bit. Yeah, I don't think Hugh Ramsey got as I don't think it got that flooded, no. So not that I saw in the study. Yes, but there was more that people had sent me pictures of, but I wasn't able to locate them. So I don't know if they had. That's what people had been telling me too, that they hadn't seen them in a long time. I don't know actually. I wouldn't know the answer. I just know they prefer prickly pear, but because their poop comes out green and stuff. So all the cactus I had seen in Hugh Ramsey were collapsed. So I don't know what they were eating. That's what I'm thinking. Could have been because of the freeze.
What has happened to the prickly pear? Do they prefer that as a food source? We think they do. We're not sure. Autumn's going around collecting their poop, seeing how green it is. I guess that's one way to tell. But within, oh yeah, maybe you can share about them peeing as well as a defense mechanism because that's a good and a bad too. I heard. But in the room, we were just basically discussing the fact that we have seen the prickly pear in decline over the last few years, whether it's because they're being shaded out, a fungus, a bug. Because I heard that there was a moth or some sort of beetle that was attacking the prickly pear as well. In Duval County, they've had that. Yeah, so I remember seeing it in a Texas Parks and Wildlife blurb that they sent out that I guess it started in Florida and has been moving steadily over and it's finally reached Texas, but that was about a year ago, so maybe it's gotten to us yet. I don't know.
So the question was, is there a difference in the home range male and female Texas tortoises? And the answer is, well, like all good biologists, I'll just say it depends. It depends on the time of year. So often during the tortoise project, what really worked to our favor is often where we'd find one, we'd end up finding another. And that's how we found a couple of the tortoises as well. So during the breeding season, you find them together rather often, and it's not hard to explain why. So their ranges overlap quite a bit. That's not to say they hang out together all year. So they definitely do diverge at one point in time, but during the breeding season, they'll overlap a lot. And as far as the what do they eat discussion, prickly pear is a high value food. But they also eat other grasses and plants as well. So any green, especially young vegetation, new vegetation is really palatable. So a Texas tortoise is never vulnerable than we. The real risk to a Texas tortoise isn't those big old guys that you find. It's the little they're much smaller, much more able to be crunched at that particular point in time. The big guys, gosh, they can withstand dogs and pick them up and move them around. The little guys are really sensitive. So when Autumn found that baby in the park, that's really encouraging to see evidence of reproduction in the park, especially in a park that used to be a landfill. So all the tortoises that are there have come from somewhere else, and then they keep breeding there. So that's really encouraging for downtown Harlingen. That's actually really awesome. So
Oh, okay. Well, one time I was walking through the park and I was just doing telemetry work and I don't know, I was just walking, minding my business, and a cop approaches me and I'm like, oh no, like what did I do? I was just barely walking. And the cop is like, what are you doing there? Like, what is that? I was like, oh, this is telemetry, like it's for my project. And he's like, oh, someone reported that you had a bow and arrow. And I was like, oh, is it and he's like, because they said you were wearing camo, they said you had like a big equipment. I was like, no, sir, like I'm sorry, like I just wear these because this is all I have. So, but yeah, I was just like, and then another cop pulled up, but I think it was the one that knew about me, so he just was like, "Oh, I'm like good, like I'll leave." But yeah, I was about to get arrested. I don't know, like it was a little nerve wracking. I'm not gonna lie, but
we borrowed from a box turtle project in North Carolina that they did on looking at prescribed fire and the response of box turtles to prescribed fire. As it turns out, box turtles are really good at getting out of the way. In the entirety of the project, I think they had 90 some tortoises tagged, 90 some box turtles, and they only had one die in the whole study, and they burned several times. So they're pretty well adapted to getting out of the way. And it makes sense because they like that early succession sort of vegetation. They would have evolved with it. So these transmitters themselves can last, gosh, it depends on the battery life. And like anything, batteries get worse over time, but they can last for a couple of years, depending on whether or not they're going time. If you look at the one that Autumn has, there's a magnet on the top. You can slow it down from emitting and kind of put it on pause if you put a magnet on top, so that extends the battery life. And then for GPS transmitters, what you're describing is exactly right. As researchers, we're always looking at the trade-off between how many locations can we collect and how much battery life do we have. For little guys, that's a hard decision. For your big guys, your elk cattle studies, whatever, you can collect locations every 3 minutes for 3 years and not run out of battery. So it's getting better all the time, and the solar power units help a lot. The solar power units make a big difference, and those will last for. Oh, I wish. We just bought 76 of them, and we're putting them out on scaled quail in out and around Freer, and then out and around Carrizo Springs. And we expect those to last around 2.5, 3 years, collecting 9 locations a day, something like that, before they run out. But they're as small as they come right now, so the battery life is small. But yeah, they're getting better all the time. So,
All right. Okay, so that'll end our meeting for tonight. Thank you guys for attending and being here. And for everyone online, thank you very much. And we'll record this and put it out there for anyone that didn't get a chance to attend tonight. All right. Thank you guys and have a safe drive back. Thank you everyone online. Oh, yes, absolutely. Happy holidays, everyone.